What is going on, my friends? Welcome. Bienvenidos. Bienvenidas, por supuesto. Willkommen, welcome to this LP story situation that I love. That I'm so, I'm so humbled by this. And I'm so honored to be a part of this. So I'm going to go sort of through a couple of things before I even get started. And one of them is, without a doubt, thanks. And I have if you see me looking to my side, it's just as I'm reading a couple of things. I want to thank, of course, Jules, for this opportunity, which I'm, again, super humbled by. I cannot not thank Jerry Zacharias, my brother, and of course, Derek Zimmerman and everything they do, not only for the company, not only for the other artists and the support they show and product development, but of course, what they do for me personally and everything that I've learned from them. And it's been an absolute pleasure and no pressure, but it's been an absolute pleasure working with them. And I want to also thank Mr. Martin Cohen, whose vision and his imagination and willing to help musicians and filling a void and a need for what percussionists needed. I think it stems from a lot of empathy, and I value that. And it has been incredible seeing somebody like him revolutionize the music industry, like Leo Fender did, like Henry Ford did for cars, like Tolkien did for fantasy writing and stuff like that. So it's an absolute honor to be in the same breath or in the same artist list as people like 𝗟𝗣 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦, of course, Tito Puente, and also people like Tommy Lee and Mike Portnoy, who are some of my idols and people that I admire and I grew up obsessed or obsessing over. So I'm just truly humbled and touched to be a part of this. And so what you can expect today, and I also speak Spanish, so if you have any questions, any things having to do with advice or any situation that you want to go over, either in Espanol, English, I will gladly help and answer your questions in Spanish really quickly. Si tienen alguna pregunta o tienen alguna inquietud o quieren saber algún tipo de consejo o si tienen alguna pregunta en cuanto a algún punto de mi carrera o algo que haya dicho que no me haya expresado de la forma más clara, por favor, me avisan. So, I'm going to talk about a little bit of my childhood, a little bit of how I fell in love with music and drumming and percussion eventually. And I just kind of want this to be a lot of motivation and inspiration and a little bit of challenging or challenge to you as a listener, and hopefully empower you with some tools and some things that I've learned throughout my career, more than just telling you how I like to play a guaguancó pattern on congas or so on. So I was born and raised in Caracas, Venezuela. I grew up in a very beautiful home with parents and a sister that were as close to each other as you can imagine. They're my best friends to this day, all three of them. My home was very, very, very musical. Like all good Venezuelans, we listened to Guaco and Rubén Blades, Willy Colón, Juan Luis Guerra. All those songs were playing constantly in my house. My dad would play it. My mom would sing along while she was cooking. My sister was a big U2 fan. She still is. And aside from that, we also heard a lot of classic rock. Queen, obviously David Bowie, Beatles. My dad is a massive Rolling Stones fan, so there was always part of my upbringing, part of my life, everyday life. It was that classic rock and salsa. So it was very beautiful. It was always encouraged to listen to music. And little by little, as I grew up watching a lot of American TV in Caracas, I started to grow obsessed with MTV and Beavis and Butthead and Bill and Ted's and all those movies that showed this sort of lifestyle and things that were incredibly different to what my upbringing was in Venezuela. And I was like super obsessed by it. I was just so impacted by it. I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. So as far as like my encounter with drumming, oh, by the way, Jules, if you want to show that picture of growing up, that exactly. So that was kind of what my life was when I was a kid. You know, my dad was a percussionist aficionado. He wasn't a professional percussionist, but he loved playing congas and bongos. And actually, the first memory I have of an LP instrument is a pair of LP bongos that my dad has that we still have. in Caracas. So all those little toys that you see back there that were just like around me, and I had them, and they were just there. But I never really felt that much of a gravitational pull towards that. I was just like, look, I'm 39 and I'm still wearing Megadeth shirts. So I was just like all into Headbangers Ball and fire and fast guitars and all that stuff. And it was just amazing. So one of my family friends, this fantastic person named Luis Zanabria, he was a little bit older than me. And you know, when you're a kid, you have these idols and people you look up to and admire. And he was definitely one of them. And he played drums, and he loved Poison, the band Poison. And he had all these posters on his wall, and I just wanted to be like him. So whatever he did, I wanted to do. So I literally went home and basically asked my parents, told them that I wanted to play drums without necessarily ever wanting to play drums or have a calling for percussion. I just wanted to be like him. So I tried to convince them. It didn't take a lot because they were always so super supportive. And I found myself not only, you know, obsessing over the instrument now, but also over music. And as you can tell, this next picture is a tiny sample of what my one part of my room looked like when I was, I don't know, I was 10 exactly. So you have on the bottom all these sports equipment, balls, and a catcher's mitt. I love, and I still love sports. And then you can see pictures of Scott Weiland of Stone Temple Pilots, Steven Tyler, Metallica poster, Billy Sheehan right next to my head, Eddie Vedder, Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue. So that was a little cork that I had. And then to my left, the entire wall was covered with that posters. And I would just stare at the posters and imagine touring and imagine, you know, playing in stadiums and playing all these drums with guitar players. I started realizing that, of course, I love the drumming aspect of it, but my sort of the visions I was having and the love for music and these images that were going on in my head as far as what I wanted to do had to do with guitar players. People like Nuno Bettencourt, Paul Gilbert, Van Halen, of course, Marty Friedman, Dave Mustaine. These were people that were my idols more than Neil Peart or Ringo Starr or John Bonham. It was always the guitar players. Like, they were the guys that I was like, they look so cool. How can I be on stage with them? Well, by playing drums, not necessarily by playing what they were playing. So that was kind of like a thing. And there were two albums at that point that really started shaping my love for rock and hard rock and metal, which were Porno Graffiti by Extreme, and that had Paul Geary on drums, and Lean Into It by Mr. Big with, may he rest in peace, Pat Torpey. Those albums were just mind-blowing. And again, I was obsessed with rock and metal and hard rock, much like a lot of percussionists. You know, the LP Stories with Fausto Cuevas was so beautiful. Shout out to Fausto, somebody who helped me a lot when I first moved to LA. And he's definitely a person that I consider a role model as far as his career. But he's also a massive metal fan and all those songs and bands, and I relate a lot to that. So that was pretty cool. So shout out to Fausto. So anyway, little by little, I started taking some drum lessons. But at the time, the teacher we weren't gelling too much, because for him, you know, I remember showing up to my first lesson ever, and I'm sure this has happened to people. I show up to my first lesson ever, and I see this amazing Ludwig drum set with cymbals, and it was just, everything was just so amazing. It was just my first time seeing a drum set up close, that cool, you know, after being into drumming. And I just, like, without realizing, I'm like walking to it, and the teacher was like, "Hey, no, hold on a second, have a seat." And I'm like, "Wait, what do you mean? The drum set's right there." So I had to have a seat away from the kid, and he puts a drum pad in between us, and then he starts doing what I then came to find were paradiddles and rudiments. And I was just like, what is this? Like, this is not music. This is not drumming. Like, what do you mean I'm hitting this rubber circle? Like, what about like making noise and playing, you know, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica, or like what is this? Like, I didn't get. So I like being around the guy. He was a cool dude. He was a really good drummer, and he would play for me. And then he would let me play like drums for like 1 minute or 2 minutes at the end of the lesson. And even at that age, I was just like, there's no way this is what drumming is. This is not what music is. And if it is, I don't really want to be doing this. I'd rather just go home and listen to music. So that's what happened. I would just like kind of not love my lessons. And then eventually I started getting a little bit better, understanding, reading a little bit more. And then I made it clear that I wanted to learn a couple of songs. One of them was For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica. And the other one was Are You Gonna Go My Way by Lenny Kravitz. And that's the song that we started with. And actually that was basically the first drum song I ever learned, which ironically was not a drummer on the record, but it was Lenny playing drums. So that was pretty cool. So anyhow, after these lessons, it cemented in lessons in terms of more experiential learning and playing music and relating it to music, not rudiments, but music. That's when it all started clicking, and I started really having a lot of fun and enjoying it. And I grew up obsessed with soccer. My biggest passion was that. And I could start seeing little by little parallels as far as like how much commitment I would need for music as compared as drumming and music as it was in sports or soccer and stuff like that. So that sort of started developing ideas in my head. So shortly after that, in 1995, my family, my mom and dad, and my sister and I, we moved to Boston. And Boston has a very special place in my family's heart because my grandfather went to BU, my dad went to MIT, and my sister had gotten admitted to Suffolk University. So we all moved to Boston to help her get settled. And during that time, I lived in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I lived some of the most beautiful moments of my life. You know, living in what I saw on TV, right? Basically, Saved by the Bell and 90210 and all the shows on Nickelodeon that I would watch, and I would be like, oh my God, this school has lockers, and this school has like, you can wear whatever you want, because I went to a private school, and like, you can bike to school. And I just remember just the summers in Venezuela, like watching the commercials on like Nickelodeon and Disney Channel and all the Nerf guns, and everybody was like in their neighborhood. It was just like another world, right? And I was experiencing that. And it was just the coolest thing ever. And my mom and dad wanted me to continue my drumming education. So they signed me up at the Brookline Music School with a teacher by the name of Warren Grant, whom I love. And he encouraged me to do recitals. And this is me in front of Brookline Music School, where I was about to perform my first gig ever. It was a solo gig. And you can see from there, the next picture you would be able to see, and you can put that. Oh, so this is me practicing basically. That was my second drum set. It was a Mapex kit. And this is me just playing this, basically Megadeth discographies, the ones that I could. And I was working on this song. And then the next picture, Jules, if you can show that, please. So that was in the middle of performing a song called Ashes in Your Mouth of Countdown to Extinction. And that bandana that I have on my head, I actually have it here. And I still have it. I don't wear it as a bandana anymore, but I still have it. So anyway, that was like my first experience making music, and it was really cool. I really liked it. And it was just, I still did a lot of the rock thing, but Warren was teaching me a lot of jazz and understanding improvisation. And he kept hinting that because I was Latino and I liked that kind of music, that I should explore that and that I should play that kind of music. But it never really like dawned on me. I was just like, dude, I just want to play metal. Like all I want to do is play Megadeth and Metallica. That's it. Extreme, all that. And by the way, really quick note, because this will come around. Even though I loved metal and I loved all that kind of stuff, my favorite song was More Than Words by Extreme. And I'll get to this in a minute. I always love that ballad. If you don't know what song that is, I recommend you listen to it. It's like the best song ever. So in all this hardcore, I'm metal and I do this, even at a young age, I love this love ballad so very much. And again, remember that song because it's part of this story. So anyhow, I was making music at Brookline Music School, learning. And eventually, in my second year in Boston, in Brookline Music School, same high school as Conan O'Brien, actually, I met a couple of guys that were skateboarders that had patches on their jackets. They were just like the most badass kids I had ever seen. Nick Schmalanzi and Fred Davidowitz. And I was just like in awe of these guys. I was just like, it was like seeing rock stars in person. that I had never seen that back home. Never. And I saw them and I was just like, these are just the coolest dudes ever. And I saw Misfits and I saw Rancid and I saw all these other bands, Sex Pistols, The Clash, Minor Threat, and all these other patches that I had no idea what they were. And I went up to them and I literally said, like, guys, you dudes are really cool. Like, what do you guys do? Like, how are you so cool, basically? And they were like, oh, we make music, we're musicians. And I was like, cool, I play drums too. And they're like, they look at each other and they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, I love drums. And he's like, okay, we're looking for a drummer. You want to come jam with us? And I went home. I probably had the biggest smile ever in my face. And I played some drums, practiced. And then I went to this guy's house in his basement. And all we did was play Misfit songs. And we just played Skulls. I don't know if anybody knows the song Skulls. Horrendous lyrics. Awful, violent lyrics. Terrible. But the song was amazing. And at that age, you hear that, and you're like, so cool. And that's what we did. We would play Misfit songs day after day for hours upon hours upon hours. We would skateboard. We would run from the police in the Boston Library, skateboarding there. And it was just amazing. And I also met a kid named Pete who showed me straight edge hardcore music, right? For those of you that don't know, straight edge hardcore is basically a subcategory of punk music and hardcore music, really, that is based on positive mental attitude, no drugs, no alcohol, standing up for what you think is right, social justice, and veganism, and a lot of different things. And at that moment, my mind was just absolutely blown because the lyrics were a whole different thing. So at first, it was all, not Satan, but the devil and violence and this, or like a killer robot and things of that nature. This was like, my friends look out for me like family, stand up for what you think is right, not being or like guilty by association and all these other things. And it just, my mind was just like, I was starting to pay attention more and more and more to lyrics. And the drumming was just always just a way for me to be with these people and hang out. It was never about what I was saying musically with a drum kit, and I'll get to percussion in a second. It was never about that. It was, I just want to be around these people. What is hardcore punk? What is this music? Guitar, bass, and drums. I play drums, so I'm just going to stick with this instrument. And it was amazing. And I've learned so much from that world, and it still gives me a lot of fire. And I'm going to quote my friend Max Bernstein, who is an amazing music director, one of the best guitar players I've ever heard. He currently plays with Taylor Swift and Miley Cyrus and has done Demi Lovato and a million people. And the way that he explains punk rock and hardcore is like, when we first listen to jazz or prog rock or fusion, it makes us want to be like different musicians and better musicians, right? It changes us as musicians. But when we listen to and we really get into hardcore and punk, we want to be different people, and it makes us want to be different humans. So that is something that I gravitated toward, and it made a big impact in my life. Little by little, I continued listening to Guaco and Rubén Blades and Juan Luis Guerra. I never stopped listening to that kind of music. A lot of Luis Enrique, actually, the album Dilema at the time. And I started getting more into percussion little by little. And I started listening to a lot of bands like Dream Theater, whom were more challenging drum-wise, but they would add, or I would notice more tambourines, and I would notice more shakers. And by the way, Mike Portnoy's percussion work, the shakers, the tambourines, the subtleties, and jam blocks here and there, cowbells here and there, the use of fast cymbals here and there, they're mind-blowing, and they do not get enough credit. Nobody talks about his percussion work, and it's outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. So I encourage you to listen to those albums just to listen. So anyway, I asked my parents for a set of timbales, and they bought me a set of Tito Puente brass timbales, and they were the coolest things I had ever played. They were amazing. And I was completely self-taught. I started playing Cáscara and started listening to Guaco albums, specifically 𝗟𝗣𝗩𝗘𝗦, to be completely, if I'm completely accurate. That was an album that I started practicing a lot too. And I really liked it. I didn't understand anything. I didn't know abanico from abacua. I had no idea. But I loved it. I loved the sound. And through skateboarding and hanging out and playing with that band that we did Misfit songs with, we were called Aberrant Youth. A guy approached me and he said that he had this ska punk band and he wanted some percussion if I wanted to play. So I said, yeah. So we did a show. It was really cool. And I played timbales and I played some cowbell here and there. And I think I had a djembe or something like that. That was my first percussion gig, really. Then shortly after that, we moved to Venezuela and we moved back, my mom, my dad, and I. And it was clear that I was finding my identity as a musician and lover of all things drums and now percussion. And I found myself little by little feeling like I had to choose sooner or later among some interests. Soccer. I wanted to be like a sports broadcaster. I love writing as well, and music. But it sort of came down to a realization, which was I am not anywhere near as committed to be a professional musician. I don't practice the typical 12-hour days that you hear people talk about. I didn't really know how to read music. I had no interest whatsoever in music theory. I had no interest at all in engineering. I didn't care about a console and a compressor and signal to noise ratio. I had no interest whatsoever in that. All I wanted to do was hopefully just close my eyes, snap my fingers and be on stage with Megadeth. That was like the dream. And obviously that wasn't going to happen. So when I had mentioned a couple of times and I was speaking with my parents about doing this for a living, it was always like, well, do you have the discipline? Do you have the wherewithal to commit and do music? And the reality was, no, I really wasn't. So I kind of shut myself off of that option and didn't even contemplate it. Graduated high school after playing in what we call gaitas, which is traditional Venezuelan music that happens during Christmas time, but it's basically like who can sound the closest to guaco, basically. And I loved playing that, and I thought it was really cool. And I was playing congas then, and I was playing timbales, and all self-taught. I took one lesson with with one of the band members, 𝗟𝗩𝗘 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗜𝗘, who's a great guy who blew my mind with teaching me timbales and congas. And then I graduated, and I was like, what do I do? Well, I can't do music because I'm not that good. Yeah, I can play Dream Theater songs, and I jam with my friend, one of my best friends, which is the only person I ever really jammed with in Venezuela, my buddy Daniel. We would just play Megadeth songs. That wasn't really like a band. That wasn't like, I wasn't showing that much of interest or facility in the instrument. I was just kind of like flying under the radar. So I decided to study sociology, and it was brutal. It was the longest and most terrifying 6 months of my life, and I decided to quit. And my parents could tell that I wasn't happy, and they said, look, if you want to do music, there's only one option, Berklee College of Music. You got to do it, or you got to apply. So before I applied, I signed up for the World Percussion Festival at Berklee College of Music. And when I got there, basically 10 seconds in, I knew that that's where I wanted to be forever. It was Eggy Castrillo playing with Tony Escapa on drums. I don't even know if I ever told Tony this. I was just like, okay, done. This is what I need to be. And it was like a salsa Latin jazz thing. They were playing like New Arrival or something like that. I forget what they were playing, but I was just like, okay, even if I want to do metal, this is where I need to be. All the students, all the people, the posters, Zildjian everywhere, LP everywhere, Fender everywhere, which is like the coolest thing. It was like working at a guitar center or something like that, but actually you get taught, and it was just amazing. So went back home, I applied for Berklee, and I got denied. I didn't get accepted because I didn't know any music theory. So I had to spend days on end learning music theory. and I just wasn't getting any of it. I didn't understand it. It was really, really difficult, but I had a really patient teacher, and he started showing me basically enough for me to get in, and I applied, and I didn't get accepted again. And then I basically wrote a letter, and I was able to then conditionally be accepted. And there I was, my first day at Berklee College of Music, super happy. And I walked through the drum practice rooms for that whole week, and it was so incredible, and the level of drumming was so big and so insane that I quit drumming. Okay, so just so you get an idea of the students that were sort of my contemporaries on drums alone, and of course I'm forgetting a million. Nicky Glaspie, okay, Thomas Pridgeon, Tony Escapa, by the way, best percussionist, best drummer probably in the whole damn school, Dana Hawkins, Jordan Perlson, okay, which is ridiculous, Martin Valihora from Slovakia, Kendrick Scott. I mean, it was just absurd. I was just like, yeah, there's just no way I can cut it with these people. Absolutely no way. It's not like, it wasn't even a subjective thing at that point. It was just like, they sound better, they play better, they know more styles, they can read, they know standards. I had an ensemble, my first ensemble, and people were giving me crap because I didn't know A Night in Tunisia. You know, I'm like, what song is this? And like, dude, A Night in Tunisia, don't you know? And I'm like, no. Like, do you know Pedro Navaja, right? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I was like, oh, damn. Okay, so it's this is the level of like where I'm at. These people play and know so many different styles. And I was just like, dude, can I just listen to Ride the Lightning, like, please? Or Siembra or something like that. All these records that you hear behind me. So it was basically a very eye-opening moment. And I was like, I quit drumming. And I was like, it's not that I quit drumming. I decided to learn something different. And I realized that was the right place for it. I had gone to Berklee with the thought of not becoming the best musician that I could, but I wanted to take lessons from Mike Mangini. That was the whole reason why I wanted to go to Berklee. For those of you that don't know Mike Mangini, currently drumming with Dream Theater, he played also in the band in the band Extreme. But I remember in one of those moments when I was a child or a kid watching videos during the G3 performance with Steve Vai during the songs For the Love of God of their album Passion and Warfare, which is the best instrumental guitar record I've ever heard. There's a drum fill that Mike does that is single flam on the snare drum, single flam on the tom, and then single flam on the bass drum. So he goes da 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 do 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 do. And I had never heard anybody do a bass drum fill or put it that way. And it was one of those, my mind is blown. I'll never forget that moment. So I was like, this guy teaches at Berklee. Oh my God, I want to take lessons with him. So that was the whole point of going to Berklee. And there I was not doing that because I was so scared of drumming. So I was like, you know what? I know drumming enough. I'm going to learn this on my own. What can I do to enhance my experience at this school? And I remembered feeling so awesome when I heard 𝗟𝗑𝗓 Castrillo play with Tony Escapa and all other players. I was like, okay, this is what I want. I would love to explore this, because I also started being, even though I was like into straight edge hardcore and metal, I really liked pop music, and I loved Jamiroquai, and I loved watching videos with, Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera or Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, and they had percussionists. I always thought that was cool. I never thought that was like, oh, dude, that sucks. You know, I'm a metal guy. No, I always welcomed that. I thought it was really, really awesome. So I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I can learn from this. So that was among the best decisions I could have ever made in my entire life. I knew that that could help me, and I was trying to play the long game, but I wasn't anywhere near as aware of the dividends that it would pay later on in my life, personally, emotionally, and obviously musically. It was just a game changer. So I was privileged enough to learn from and get everything that I know in my repertoire, in my vocabulary, at least the very beginning, from 𝗟𝗑𝗓𝗘 Castillo, Mike Rinquist, Ernesto Diaz, Jamie Haddad, and Ricardo Monzon were among the teachers that really shaped my hand percussion experience, and everything that I know is thanks through them. I remember vividly being taught, tumbao and guaguancó and bomba plena, and learning how to play an abanico, which I still need to learn and work on. There were just beautiful experiences. Everything was brand new. It was a clean slate. Everything was new. Taking lessons with Jamie, and how he would express how much he loved, of course, Elvin Jones and all these guys, but he loved Ringo Starr. And that's something that both 𝗟𝗑𝗓 and Jamie had in common, and still have in common, which is the love of classic rock and respecting their influences. And that is something that I always take near and dear to my heart, because that's what I like to be and portray, is somebody who's very close to their influences and pay respect, and to a degree, just show gratitude to the people that got me into music, that lit that fire inside me. And 𝗟𝗑𝗓 has not only taught me that, and Jamie as well, but they're now part of that fire that is inside me. Now, when I play anything having to do with frame drums, or when I play handpan, or when I play other instruments that are non-Latin, let's just say, world instruments, I try to channel Jamie. What would Jamie do? When I play congas, I try to think, okay, what would 𝗟𝗑𝗓 do? What would Ernesto do? What would Mike do? What would Ricardo do? So I really appreciate that. And also, one thing about Berklee, aside from the drumming community, as far as the faculty, to hang out and see, to this day, some of my favorite percussionists, Robert Rosario, Tony Escapa, guys that went to school with me. Paula Green, she would play shaker in all these hip hop shows, and congas, amazing patterns and funky things that no other dudes were playing. Like, that had a big impact in my life. But also the other musicians that were around was something that I'll never forget. I was able to start sort of playing sort of pop percussion-y type stuff, the cajon and shaker and all that stuff, with who now is St. Vincent. And I did that at Berklee. It was a beautiful experience, and was one of the highlights of my life. It still is, that first rehearsal with Annie, and seeing what a talent she was, and that I was in the presence of somebody incredibly gifted and special. So little by little, I started getting super into Latin jazz drumming, and clave with my left foot, and that whole thing, and a lot of percussion and timbales, bongos, of course congas, which is sort of my main instrument aside from drum kit. And I met Japanese keyboard player by the name of Yukihiro Kanesaka, Yuki Kanesaka, whom I love, and it was a musical brother from the first day I played with him. We started writing songs, and for about 1.5 years or so, we started developing this Latin jazz duo, which we call Latin groove duo, which we would do like some R&B songs, some Latin jazz songs, and it started being like what I felt I needed to do. At Berklee, I was lucky enough to play in honorary doctorates for Juan Luis Guerra and Rubén Blades, which were massive highlights. But I started developing a lot of this concept I had with Yuki, and sort of the pinnacle of that was performing at a Latin jazz festival in Venezuela. And yes, we have a short video of that. You can just play a few seconds of that, Jules, please. And this was what we did. We just mess with songs and try to have the other one mess up. That's the whole idea. Okay, that's cool, Jules. Thank you. So this was 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗘𝗦, obviously, and we would do covers of Night in Tunisia, Caravan, and we would also do Funky Monks by the Chili Peppers and a bunch of stuff. It was just a beautiful, some 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗘 tune. So it was a beautiful period of my life when it was no holds barred, express musicality, try to do super challenging things, mess up, learn new rhythms. You know, from that sort of to put things in perspective, that I had only been playing like Latin music for a year and a half, 2 years on drums. Even then, at that time, I was mostly playing and trying to develop my vocabulary on congas and bongos and timbales and stuff and frame drums. So it was a beautiful part of my life. And it was also a tricky period because it was like people around me, whether it was my parents, no pressure from my parents, but it was like, oh, you're the Latin guy, you're playing Latin music, or play Latin music. And it was kind of pigeonholed as the Latin jazz thing. And that was cool, but like I wanted to play rock and play with rock stars and stuff. But it wasn't really a thing or a possibility in Boston after Berkeley. And I was just like, well, I guess I have to do this. It's kind of like the natural sort of way of things. And then eventually moved to New York and stuff like that. So as the international student that I was, I had to get my visa sorted out. And visa implied having work and having a lot of gigs and trying to line up with a band that would play more or artists that would play a lot. So they would be my sponsors and all that stuff that us international students deal with. And I was asked to audition for this band called Mango Blue, which featured 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗘 on bass and vocals, and they had Ernesto. I mean, it was like the best one of La Timba Loca and Mango Blue were like the best bands when I was there in Boston. And I was like, oh, dude, I got this. You know, I play drums, I play this. Like, I can do some of the stuff that El Negro Hernandez does. I can do this. I play all the Guaco records. I play all the, Robbie Amin stuff from Rubén Blades. I got this. I didn't really practice that much. I assumed because I knew the band and I was friends with them that I would get it. And I absolutely tanked the audition. It was terrible. I sucked. I couldn't solo. I thought the songs would be very structured and it was like open solos and up in this. And I didn't know any idea about cues. I didn't hear chord progressions. It was just awful. And I went to my house basically crying. And I couldn't believe that after all that money I had paid and taking lessons from Dave DeCenso, Mike Mangini, and Eggy Castrillo, and Jamie Haddad, I could do them like that, right? I was like, I didn't keep my end of the bargain. I didn't practice enough. I wasn't prepared. And it was a rude awakening. So I called Eggy and I told him like, hey man, I need some work. I'll do whatever you want. Please, if you know anybody that needs a percussionist, let me know. And he said, I actually need a roadie for a show because I have to do some errands in between. Can you do it? And I was just like, my ego, right? I was just like, I don't want to be a roadie. Come on, man. I just graduated from Berklee College of Music, blah, blah, blah. But I said, yes, I'm going to do it. So I went, I did it. And he introduced me to a producer named Leo, who in turn asked me to go to his studio one day. So I did, not expecting any money or to be paid I didn't know what I was expecting. I just showed up with a bag full of shakers, cajon, bongos. I looked like a homeless person on the train. Like I had everything I owned with me. And I go to the studio and I set up and the door opens up and in walks in my favorite singer from my favorite band, Gary Cherone from Extreme. And I don't even know if we have a picture of that, Jules, but I think I did. I don't know. Anyhow, I was in a room with my favorite singer of all time. This guy walks in and he looks at my percussion stuff and he says, oh, cool, man. You're the percussionist we're working with. My name is Gary. And I was like, shut the hell up. Like fangirling. Like I couldn't believe it. So there I was with no Instagram, no, hey, this is my brand or TikTok or watch what I did or selfies. None of that. It was a moment of myself, Gary Cherone, and my dear friend Leo Malaise that I owe my whole music career to, walked in and we played More Than Words, the song that I told you that was my favorite song growing up. And we played Wholehearted and we did a bunch of his solo stuff. And it was just the most, I get chills thinking about it. It was the most special moment of my musical life. And they asked me to do a couple of gigs with him, and this was the big gig that I did, or the main gig that I did, and his the release of his EP, Need I Say More? And that was my first ever percussion setup, like pop percussion setup. Chimes, I had a pair of bongos, 𝗟𝗣𝗦𝗘 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗜𝗘 𝗟𝗑 bongos, which at the time were unbelievable, and they still are unbelievable. And I definitely recommend 𝗟𝗡𝗦𝗘 bongos, believe it or not. So for a professional, I'm not talking about, they're outstanding. So that was a moment where I was like, okay, dreams come true. I love this. I love it more than anything I ever did, more than any drum solo or applause that I got when I was working with Yuki or whatever. This was just like what I dreamt of when I was a child. This is it. This is what music is. This is what I want. So I rekindled my love for that world through knowing that these things were a possibility and my life could be this. And I decided to pursue this more and more and more, that world, and not think too much about moving to New York and all that stuff, because I didn't think I could hang with any of those guys. But the kind of gigs that I wanted were in LA. The dudes from Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Poison, Mr. Big, Metallica, Megadeth, Extreme, minus Cherone, they were all in LA. Those were the guys that I want to play with, on top of all the pop stuff. So I had a conversation with Cherone, and I asked him what he thinks I should do, and he said, you should move to LA. So I moved. I bought a one-way ticket on January 29th of 2007, and I've been here for 14 years. When I first moved, I had very little money, and I still have very little money. And it was deliciously rough. It was like brutal at first. I didn't have much money. It took me like 3 weeks to have a car. It was just painful, but it was so amazing to discover myself and grow and drive eventually to a couple of pubs and see what everybody was doing. And yeah, I heard of all these jam sessions and all these other stuff. So I tried to go to a couple of them, and I would drive by Sunset Boulevard, and I would drive by the Roxy and the Whiskey and the Viper Room and the Rainbow. And I was like, I literally dreamt of doing this, and here I am. I had never been to LA. I just came on my own. And then when I try to navigate and okay, cool, I'm going to try to play with some bands. A band that I was working with actually in Boston / New York, we all moved to LA right around the same time. So I had a gig to a degree, playing some shows here and there. I would only pay like $50 or something. But it was some income. I was teaching a little bit. But I decided that instead of going to all the jam sessions where everybody was going to, I would go to open mics, and I would go to singer-songwriter nights and showcases and see who needed percussion. And then I would offer my services then. So that was a massive game changer. Totally recommend it. And I have no shame in saying that I would play it for free a lot. And it was, again, one of the best decisions I could ever made or have ever made, especially if I'm going into a scene and be humble and pay my dues and be like, okay, I want to meet people. Because I'd rather play and have under my belt gigs at a bunch of venues when I'm also needed for my visa later on, to apply for my visa and back that up, than just like, oh no, I'm worth, X amount of money and I'm only playing if they pay me this. Like, that's not me. That is not me. Now things are slightly different, but it's still music above anything. Music is like watch Fausto's LP story. Music is my biggest joy. Everything else is bonus. And I've never seen music as a dollar sign or the way that I make money. I teach and I play music and they pay me, but it's not my life. It's not revolved around a dollar sign or my value, which we're all priceless. None of us have, a monetary, value, so to speak. So LA was groundbreaking for me. Started playing small gigs here and there, and then these gigs started happening. And then I answered an ad on Craigslist, and I met my friend Jamie. We did a few shows, and he would, again, throw some money my way, $25, $50, and so on, gas money. And I started doing more and more. And eventually another Craigslist ads I replied was for the band. It didn't know at the time, but it was the band Streetlight Manifesto, which is a legendary ska punk band. and they knew of Mass Hysteria, the band that I had played with at Brookline High School, just so you get an idea. And they knew the bands like H2O and all this hardcore punk stuff that I was loving. We connected with that. And I did the album Somewhere in the Between. And I think one of the songs has like 15 million plays or something like that. And I did a bunch of other records with them. So that was amazing. And another life-changing thing was being hired by School of Rock in Hollywood, the first one ever. And the first one in LA, I should say. And it was amazing. I owe so much to Carl Restivo for having hired me and all the faculty there. And that was definitely a change. My life is definitely divided into pre-School of Rock, post-School of Rock. And the way we taught, the students that I met, students that are now, you know, not from that time, but they're working with Tyler, the Creator, Daisy just sang on. They're just part of the music ecosystem now, which is unbelievable. And I'm so proud of all those students. And through one of the shows we did, was to pay tribute to Van Halen. And I met Richie Kotzen, guitar player, whom I had posters on my wall. And I actually had, oh, that's a new poster. But anyway, I grew up idolizing Richie Kotzen. He played in Mr. Big, but he also did his solo stuff and Poison as well. So all these bands that you've heard me say before, Poison, Mr. Big, Extreme, they were kind of like part of my culture growing up, and that now they were part of my life. So I met Richie through the school, and he asked me to jam with him one day because he was looking for a drummer, and I did, and he loved my drumming. And it was so surreal getting to his house, not only going to Richie Kotzen's house and him asking me if I knew any of his music, which was absurd, but showing up, and I sit down, and there were some drumsticks on the snare drum, and I grabbed them, and they were Pat Torpey's sticks. Pat Torpey from Mr. Big, first second album I ever owned, Lean Into It. So it's been magical. So I toured with Richie, making my musical dreams come true, touring all over Europe. And this is, we did, I think, 27 different countries or something like that. Latvia, Estonia, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, you name it, all over the South America and Europe. And this is us jamming. I forget where this is from. Budapest, an amazing venue called A38 or A35, which is on a boat right on the Danube River. So this is what it is. Daniel Pearson. So while we try to solve this audio, you can watch that video later. So just imagine a really, really good guitar player soloing. It was just outstanding. And so even though I had been focusing a lot on percussion and trying to do a lot of like pop percussion gigs here and there, I always loved drumming, and I kept drumming, and I kept practicing, and I kept shedding, and I was just doing a lot of visualization exercises and working on records and stuff like that. And eventually I was able to play with Richie. So don't worry about that, Jules, all good. So that was a beautiful, beautiful period in my life, and got to meet some of my favorite rock stars. We did shows in London, and Adrian Smith of Iron Maiden was there. We played a show for Jason Becker, and Steve Lukather was the monitor booth. It was just surreal meeting people like Jerry Cantrell and Who's Who, and playing a show at the House of Blues in LA, and seeing the entire lineup of Mr. Big, you know, up on the balcony watching me play, watching him play, and I was just there. It was just surreal, and I'm so thankful and grateful for these things that I've learned and these things that I've lived. And I have developed a passion for teaching and sharing that period of all those things that I've learned. And because if I can do it, I'm positive that other people can do it as well. So in that world where I felt that I found my home, and that I made my career, and that was it, and I could do that forever. I got a phone call when I was in Costa Rica by John Taylor, the music director of the Jonas Brothers. And he asked me to play percussion, if I was interested in playing percussion with the brothers. Little did I know, in 2010, now 2011 that I would still be working with them. There were periods where I wasn't, but they weren't using percussion. So that was the beginning of a very magical, beautiful world in part of period in my life that I will always be grateful for, and I'm continuously grateful for. So it was the jump from my dream gig with Richie, musical, personal, and otherwise, to this opportunity that I could then see. It was my way for the tour buses and the planes and the pyro and the production rehearsals and the road cases and the crew and all that other stuff. Like I would watch on those Bon Jovi ballad videos or Def Leppard videos. I was like, okay, this is what I want. I think I need that in my career. And then that was amazing. I played with the Jonas Brothers. Then, and mind you, there are lots ups and downs in between, failed projects and so on. But Jonas Brothers, then they took a little bit of a break, and I did drums with Victoria Justice. Then I did some percussion with Cobra Starship, who had a song called You Make Me Feel that you guys might know. And then a bunch of other stuff. I ended up doing some stuff with Iggy Azalea as well. A lot of bands, failed bands that I thought would make it, or songwriters that things never happened. And by the way, I have never, ever landed an audition that I ever did. I have never gotten a call back. So for all of you guys that are super worried about an audition or being sent home, there's always something better around the corner. The same way that I failed with the Mango Blue audition and I got the Gary Cherone gig. I failed another audition for a friend of mine and I got the Kotzen gig a week later. So it's been amazing. So eventually I got a call to play drum set with Nick Jonas, and that was amazing. We played in Tokyo, Mexico, Bahamas, Singapore, all over the US, you name it. And here's a clip of a show we did at a massive festival in Brazil called Vila Mix, and this is playing his song, Jealous.
You're too sexy, beautiful. Everybody wants to taste it. Alright. Bring the beat back. You're too sexy, beautiful. Everybody wants to taste it. Alright. You're too sexy, beautiful. Everybody wants to taste. That's why, yeah, baby. I still get you.
Awesome. So LP has been a massive constant through my whole musical career, drumming and obviously percussion. There was a period when I was with the brothers where I was with another company for a little bit, but it was always who could get the closest to LP that it's not LP, and the answer is nobody. So why Nick Jonas's gig was so important to me from a percussion standpoint is because aside from playing drums, I was given the green light and explicit direction to not worry about SPDS pads. And Nick called me and he told me to not do any electronics, to be myself and be as organic as possible. So that's what you can't really see it there. But I have, maybe you have that picture from the baseball stadium. That was around the time when the LP Raw stuff started coming out, and I had just established a relationship with LP through Jerry. Okay, you don't see a baseball stadium. It doesn't matter. The point is, I started using a lot of LP stuff more than ever. So I had my chimes behind me to my right, which you can't see, and I should have sent you this picture. I had congas, I had some bongos, and on my left side it was all the raw stuff. So I had two of the trash snares, one upside down, one regular, the trash can stuff, and then I had none of the toms, but I just had those two. I had two micro snares, and I had a couple of jam blocks, and I also had a micro snare in front of me as if it was a cowbell, and I also had another cowbell. So I just implemented a lot of stuff in mimicking, finger snaps and mimicking claps and all this other stuff. It was all through that. And one of the things that I've used that has been a game changer, that has been part of my identity, is the sound enhancers that the LP Raw stuff has. But I use it on my snare drum. Every snare drum I have, I use it. It's part of my sound. It adds a little, almost like an artificial reverb. It dampens it as well, and it sounds pretty unique. So that's part of my sound now. So that was a beautiful, a very, very important part of my musical drumming career, was implementing the real organic stuff and having my thing, having my own setup. I've always been a one up, one down type drummer. Never liked anything fancy. One ride, one crash, maybe another crash. That's it. I've never had a thing. I never had, the main thing. And I started doing that, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it sort of started putting things in motion for myself. And so that was one of the main things that I did. And then eventually we took a little bit of a break, and the brothers reunited, and they released the song Sucker, which ended up obviously being a worldwide hit, a #1 song. And it was a life-changing thing. Let me look at this order of pictures really quick. So among the things that I always dreamt about, the principle, the dream, if when people are like, oh, if you could play any venue, what would you do? You can play any show, what would you do? For me, it was Saturday Night Live. That was it. I grew up literally watching that ever since I don't know, since Chris Farley was part of that show. I was watching that. David Spade. And I got to do it. So here's a clip of us playing Sucker at Saturday Night Live. And I know you can barely see me, and I know it could look like Marcos Lopez or something, but I promise you it's me. So this was amazing. I mean, it was just like one of those where, okay, I can retire moments. I'm happy. It just, I can't, I'm speechless. And it's not like, oh my God, I can't believe how far I've come. It's just like amazing that those were a dream that I had that came true. Of course, there's a lot of work in between, but that is just, it's surreal to me, and it's something that's very, very special. So after that, we embarked on a 100-day tour for what was the Happiness Begins tour. And when I got in touch with Derek and Jerry, and we started talking about the instruments that I would take, and with my production manager and all these other things, I felt like I wanted to do something special, something different. Because my setup is very conventional, I wanted something to stand out. Not, hey, people look at me, but to pay tribute to people. Because I had seen how my favorite drummers had passed away. Pat Torpey of Mr. Big, Vinnie Paul of Pantera, Nick Menza of Megadeth. And I never really got a chance to pay tribute to them while they were alive. So at that time, Eddie Van Halen was alive. And this is what I decided to do. Jules, if you can play that video. This was my way of creating something that would be unique, but it also would pay tribute and show to the spirits that be, and at the time when he was alive, how big of an impact guitar players can have on percussionists, or this crossing of influences that doesn't have to be, I could have had Pedrito Martinez's congas, but that's not a guy that got me into playing congas. No disrespect. He's one of the GOATs, right? But that's just not that's not what my influence was. I was like, I want a guitar that looks like, that looks like a guitar. How can I do that? Which are the most emblematic guitars? I'm like, well, the Frankenstein guitar. So here's the video. What's up, guys? We're here at Third Encore, and I'm decorating my brand new 𝗟𝗑𝗦 Patato congas in honor of Eddie Van Halen, one of my favorite guitar players in the world. So I figured for this upcoming special tour, what could I do that could add something cool and interesting? And what cooler thing than Eddie Van Halen's guitar? Look at this. Eddie Van Halen style congas. So those bad boys are the centerpiece of my musicality and my percussion rig. And, you know, one of, oh yeah, you can show that picture, please. So this is sort of my rig with the brothers. Very fortunate to be able to, as cheesy as that sounds, that's my office type of thing. That is it. That's what I used every single night, and the most reliable, the most versatile instruments. It's just the highest honor I believe that a percussion player can have is to be associated with Latin percussion. And I'm proud, very, very proud to be a part of this family and share it with some of my idols, people that I look up to, people that have had a direct and indirect impact in my life that I will forever be grateful for. And I cannot not thank the Jonas Brothers themselves for wanting to have percussion in their music. It's outside of normal thinking. Like, it's just unbelievable. And for them to want to have those sounds, and it has been the honor of my life. So here's a video so you can kind of see what our tour was all about. And this is, yes, exactly. This documentary is available on Amazon if you guys want to watch.
I was done with the Jonas Brothers. Hell no. It's really great to know that these songs have been someone's soundtrack to a lot of their favorite memories in their life.
We're kind of their boys in a way. We own that. We love it. Just want to make them proud.
Hey, the happiness begins right now!
Think anyone will come?
Happiness begins.
Yeah, so to be part of a project that means so much to so many people is absolutely magnificent, and it touches my heart, and it's just such an honor. Beyond all the stuff that we know and we love, and the percussion that I love Giovanni, and I love Pedrito Martinez, and I love Marcos Lopez and Pablo Stagnaro, and I love Sola Kimbola. I mean, I love all these guys. They're amazing. They're part of my musical DNA to a degree. Add to that the fact that I get to play music that means so much to so many people. It's like my mom says, life is not about making your dreams come true, but making your life a true living dream. And I've been able to do that, not only thanks to the people that have hired me, but the percussion instruments that I use, literally the instruments that I use, because I fell in love with the instruments of congas by playing LP congas, LP timbales. That's just a fact. I can't separate it. I'm not just saying this. So the way that Motley Crue has been a part of my life, my whole life, so has that LP logo. And that's why I chose the Patato congas, to give a tip of the hat to Patato, but also modernize it with the Van Halen stuff and cross worlds. And here we are. So thank you for letting me tell you a little bit of my life story, or a lot of my life story. And I think Jerry is on standby to chat.
There he is.
How are you, my friend?
Demian, thank you so much for
man.
sharing your story, for being here. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. It never gets old to see your face. And of course, thank you in person. Thank you and Derek and Jules and everybody. It's amazing. So thank you.
That's a wonderful team. Thank you, man. And congratulations again for everything that you do for us. Seriously. I mean, throughout this whole time, we've been in touch since the very beginning, and, all the requests and everything, and seeing you produce these amazing congas for Jonas Brothers. How cool is that? I mean, that's really creative. I love that, man. It looks amazing. And what an honor. Yeah.
Yeah, the honor is mine, like I said, to be associated with you all, and not only the company, the logo, the people, you, Derek, Jules, the receptionist at DW who always pronounces my name correct. Like, it's just amazing. So I'm honored and I'm touched, and the least I can do is propel this love forward, you know.
Right on. Thank you, man. And yeah, just thank you for sharing your story. I love that that you listen to 𝗟𝗩 �𝗧𝗢𝗏, and then you're also a big fan of Beavis and Butthead and Stone Temple Pilots and Megadeth. That's awesome, man. That's great. Man. That is pretty cool, I gotta say.
Thank you.
So I imagine you're a big fan. I mean, one of my favorite albums is Rust in Peace. Yeah, what a great. I mean, Nick Menza. I mean, that's a really.
It's a masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece. And I just did I did a show at the Baked Potato a little bit ago. It was my first gig post-pandemic. I was really nervous. It was like super high-end musicians, and I was just very nervous. You know, a little imposter syndrome type of situation kind of came over me. And then when I got to the Baked Potato, I realized that I was playing, because I did one song on drums. It was where Nick Menza passed away, literally on stage. And I got some emotion stuff that I kind of had to not think about so I could perform, but it was great. And you know, it was a beautiful, one of those crazy, beautiful experiences that life throws your way because of music, you know?
That's great. And that's really cool to see that he was an influence. I love that, you know, you have the mixture of, you know, your roots in Venezuela and the Latin roots. And then of course you have the modern pop stuff that you're mixing together. How do you apply that to your playing? Like when you're playing with Jonas Brothers, like, you know, I know you have this arsenal, I'm pretty sure, of like all these different rhythms, but how do you keep it real to the music, and how do you apply all that information to what you're doing on stage?
That's a great question. I think it's a combination of things. I think to one degree, I never went the super studios route to, you know, I didn't, you know, go to Barcelona and study cajon. I didn't go to, you know, Rio to learn samba, or, you know, I was just kind of getting a little bit here and there, even studying some of the greats. It was just like a little bit of Giovanni, a little bit of that. Part of it has to do with some sort of ceiling to my ability, you know, where I couldn't play the Giovanni stuff, or I couldn't play the Pedrito Martinez stuff, but maybe I could feel cool playing other stuff that was a little more simple. And that's what I heard that made more of an impact in my mind. So when you hear 𝗟𝗩 and you hear 𝗟𝗩 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗏 play, you know, Mr. Moon or Scam, or, you know, Cosmic Girl, that speaks way more to me than any solo or percussion break that anybody did. So I was like, I want that. What are they doing? They're playing very simple, sparse stuff. What is that? And that always had a big impact in my life. How I felt songs instead of compositions, if that makes any sense. So that's what I try to apply. Just stay out of the way and hear what does the song have? Does the song have congas? Okay, might play congas. Does the song have shakers? Okay, I might play shakers. And I say might, it's because it's not our choice as percussionists. I want to make it clear for people that might not know. You might think you want to play X, Y, or Z, but the music director and the artist are the bosses. They tell you what to do. So if you hear a percussionist play like a cheesy or corny pattern, or, you know, you hear congas and he's playing shakers and he has congas in front of them, and you're like, why is he not playing congas? Like, what's going on? Or he or she? It might not be the percussionist. It might be the boss. It might be the other people that tell him what to do. So yeah, just throwing that little piece of information.
That's awesome. And I love that Jonas Brothers also they told you that not to use any SPDFX or notepads or anything. Just keep it authentic, keep it, or, you know, organic.
Yeah.
I love that. And then you obviously have to go with what, you know, I'm pretty sure they're telling you, you know, hey, that's, you know, just be who you are, play what you know, do what you do with the music, you know. But I love that they said no electronics, just all acoustic, and you implemented the right items in the right place. It's really cool to see that. Yeah,
it's also like what the fans want. What do they want to digest? What they want to hear? And if you play identical to the album, that's what most people want to hear. But if you do this like Uber arrangement, Santana type of arrangement, then you lose them. But if you do something kind of in between and you let loose in certain parts, people like that. And that's what the brothers, the three of them, internalize and they love. And at that point, it's not really about the fans. It's like, what do they want to hear with their music? A little bit of this, a little bit of that, not too much of this, not too much of that. And they vocalize it, and I'm all ears. So whatever they want, you know, I do it. And one day they're like, dude, we only want you to play SPDS pads. I'll have an SPDS kit. Like, that's what it'll be, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah. What's your I guess approach to hybrid drumming? You know, whether it's drum set, percussion, electronics. What's your approach to that?
It's very little, to be honest with you. I've always been super intimidated by electronics. You know, when I was told to not use an SPDS pad, I was just felt overwhelmed with relief. I was like, oh, I don't need to worry about any of this stuff and the dynamics and the setting and the sampling. And I'm not good at that stuff. I have a limited knowledge and interest in those things, to be completely honest. I'd rather listen to Rust and Peas again than figure out how to put in a sample on my pad. But it's part of my job, and I need to do it. I need to learn. So my approach is, if I have help, I have much more creativity, and I can be like, yeah, let's put a pad here, let's put a pad there, let's put a pad there. And I welcome that. I think it's a sign of the times. And by the way, this is something that has been going on. Alex Van Halen was doing this, you know, 20 years ago. There were drummers that weren't using electronics, you know, for years and years. It's more popular nowadays, but it's also been happening for a long time. So I like it. I respect it. I'm just not really that great at it. But I like to compartmentalize. If it's drumming, drumming. If it's percussion, it's percussion. That's sort of where my mind is at with that.
Nice. Yeah. And you also have a podcast that you talk a lot about these issues and about musicianship in general. And can you tell us a little bit about the podcast? I know you created, it's called the Music Mentor Podcast, where you educate, empower, and motivate up and coming musicians and just everyday people. What motivated you to start that?
I always wanted to be, oh, thank you for mentioning it, by the way. I always wanted to be like a radio show host. And coupled with this, I noticed that a lot of people would come to me for advice, or they feel lost in the music industry, or just random people texting me. And I was like, well, I've learned so much. So instead of waiting for somebody to tell me something for me to show it to them or guide them, I'm just going to have a database of every topic that I could think of. So I started the podcast, and that was 5 years ago. There weren't a lot of podcasts then.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I've been doing. I haven't done it for a few months, but because I'm shifting more towards Twitch, I'm doing more of a live thing. But that's what I did. Just in their 10 to 15 minute long episodes, in which I talk about auditions, proper preparation. I talk about jealousy, I talk about touring. I talk about the imposter syndrome. I talk about moving places. I talk about being punctual. Anything and everything you can imagine, I try to talk about, so that somebody that wants to, you know, be a professional musician, and they feel like they have a long way to go in their timbal soloing, let's just say, and they want to play timbal for a salsa band, and that's what they want to do, but they are horrible at being punctual. They're not punctual. They don't know how to do that. That's what I wanted to do, because a lot of times, a lot of musicians, they tell you that we need things aside from talent, right? The talent isn't everything. But few tell you what are the other things are, right? So, or they mention a couple, and they kind of let you figure it out on your own. It's like, oh, you figure it out on your own. I'm like, no, I want to tell you what they are, so that you make your dreams come true quicker, more effectively, and that you're more present, and then you can enjoy them more, and then multiply those, and then help other people help themselves, you know, that whole thing. So that's the passion behind it.
That's awesome. You're helping the community. Yes, absolutely. And it is kind of a community, really. I mean, all of us, and, you know, working, you know, with Fausto and everybody else, and all the different drummers that you know, LP is a huge family. So it really is a community. And so there's a lot of artists who are helping that community and building that and sharing their information, like yourself. And we're always grateful for that too, you know, because you're inspiring, you know, you're helping others that might have the same kind of goals, you know, that take the same approach. And, you know, I love that you're talking about auditions and trying them out and not always being successful. You know, that's very humbling. It's really cool. And it goes to show that even though you didn't get that gig, you know, just keep going, keep trying.
Yeah, you know, it is true. We're a community, and thank you for those kind words. And one thing about Fausto that I found fascinating, it was an eye-opening, humbling thing. When I first met him, I think a week before he was out with Jennifer Lopez playing like, I don't know, some absurd like River Plate Arena or something like that. And the next day he was playing at Floridita, playing, you know, Willie Colon songs on congas and timbales. And I was like, why is this guy going from like the biggest tour in the world to like playing at a restaurant? And you meet him and then you hear him playing, you're like, oh, I get it. I mean, it's obvious. He loves music. This is what he needs to be able to do that. That is just a bonus. This is the real thing, you know? And that's where the community aspect comes in, where he, you know, puts the proverbial arm over your shoulder, teaches you the ropes and tells you a couple of things. So, I will always be thankful for, you know, we hear a lot in these stories, like so-and-so got me this gig and this. Nobody really ever got me a percussion gig directly from a percussion player to a percussion player that I can remember. I don't want to be ungrateful, just out of memory. But those little nuggets that Fausto, this guy Michael Duffy that gave me when I first moved to LA, those are like mind-blowing things that I will always be grateful for. And if I can extend that sense of community and people can reach out, because a lot of people are nervous, Jerry. Some people are like, oh, I want to ask Jerry about, like, I want to be an artist relation, but I don't want to ask him, you know, I don't want to bother him. No, I know you. I could ask you right now, like, hey, what does it take to be an artist rep, you know, among the million other things that you do? Same with me. Like, I want, if you don't want to ask Pedrito Martinez a question, if you don't want to ask Fausto Cuevas a question, if you don't want to ask Eddie Montalvo a question or Tony Escapa or whatever, ask me. I might not be able to tell you what it's like to play with Stevie Wonder, but I can tell you some things that might help you get to that point, you know?
Right. That's awesome. Really cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Demian. Yeah. And I'll see a couple of videos of you playing. You'll play guitar, you'll play bass. Man, it's really cool. You're multi-instrumental. It shows in the back right there, your background. You have guitar, you have bass. Yeah. Always in service of the music. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. That's the biggest piece of advice that I could give a drummer or percussionist is play other instruments. Yeah. Play guitar, play bass, learn how to sing, play piano. It just expand your life and your musicality exponentially. And it's just beautiful. And I feel lucky. And I like showing the progression. It's not like, you know, I work for 3 days or 10 days and I just play a solo to show off. It's like, that kicks my ass, man. So why not show to friends like, hey, man, I'm not a guitar player, but do it. It might inspire somebody that is also trying to do that to post it. So you never know. And that has happened to me. So that's why I'm doing it.
That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing all the knowledge that you have. And anything that you'd like to, any final words you'd like to tell the audience. And also, I always like to ask, and, you know, where can we find you? What do you got going on? I know you just recently sent me some information that you guys are going out on tour. Yeah. It's such a relief to see that a lot of guys are going back out there, and this pandemic is starting to slowly wind down. We're not out of the woods yet, but I mean, as far as anything, it's good to see people really starting to cautiously, you know, start booking stuff. And I know you've got a big tour coming up. Please tell us a little bit about that. And
thank you, man. When I found out, I didn't even tell my wife first. I texted you and Derek. I was like, going on the road. So it was amazing. We're gonna go. That feeling was amazing. Very thankful that things are winding down, like you're saying. And we're gonna be doing a 45 or 50 day tour all over the U.S. with the Jonas Brothers again, starting in August. Nice. So I'm really happy about that. And yeah, I mean, if I teach as well, you know, I teach drums and I teach percussion, and I also give a lot of private mentoring for music mentoring. So it's basically a specialized, you know, dedicated / life coaching thing, which I'm about to get a life coaching certification, by the way.
Nice.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm always here to help people and educate. And as far as where they can find me exactly, my Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, they're the same, Demian Arriaga. And I talk a lot about soccer, a lot about music, a lot about random stuff. So always welcome to hear people, what they want to talk about, if they have any insecurities, all that other stuff. Know that you're not alone. I've gone through a lot of these things, and we're a community. And again, the last thing I would say is just thank you from the bottom of my heart to you, to Derek, Jules, and LP. It's an honor. It's a dream come true, and it just doesn't really get old. And these things and this community and this ability for me to showcase this only brings me closer to family and friends that I haven't seen in a long time. And I know my dad and mom and dad are watching, and my sister. And it's just beautiful to have that and have this this window. So I really appreciate it. And I need to see you next week because I need to get some bongos, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
Always here to help, brother. And thank you once again. Always a pleasure. And we're here to support you 100%. And you're very much loved here. Big thank you also to Jules. Thank you very much for putting this whole thing together. So
yes,
thank you again, Demian. And we love you. Please take good care. And I'll be seeing you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Peace and love. Thank you.